Hello everyone, it's back on Tuesday. Today we have a few issues here. As you can see, we have a sea of red now. That's the typical part of the year where all the API reviews trickle in, and so we try to dig ourselves out of that hole that we created for ourselves. And we have another session on Thursday to do exactly that. Then I think, Tarek, unless you have preferences, let's start with this one here because it's the bigger one.
Yeah, it should be a quick one too, because
you just jinxed it.
yeah, let's see. Okay, so we have a metric, and in the metric we have different instruments like counter, histogram, up, down, counter, and so on. So this proposal is adding a new one. It's called gauge. So the difference between like gauge and counter, for example, I mean, counter is counting, I mean, like incrementing value or incrementing, decrementing, but gauge is just reporting one value that it doesn't make sense to accumulate or do anything with it. Like, you know, reporting like room temperature, for example. I mean, like you don't add that room temperature every time you report it, right? So in our design, I mean, like we have the meter class, which has a factory method to create any instrument. So like we have like meter.create counter, create histogram, and so on. So here in this proposal, as we are introducing gauge instrument, so we are going to add a new create gauge methods in the meter factory methods, just to create the gauge. Just looking, I think those should be static, but I forgot to put the static. It should be similar to the other methods like create counter or create histogram, whatever. And and of course, I mean, like, you know, we are introducing the instrument, the gauge, which is subclass instrument of T, and this is just like have the method to record the values. I mean, with either value only or with one tag or couple of tags or array of tags or a span of tags. Yeah, so that's the whole proposal here. So it's kind of parallel to, like, if you look at like counter, how we support counter today. I mean, it would be similar to this.
What are the T's you usually support?
Yeah, this is numeric types. Like we support like int, long, double, decimal. We have like set of like six types, I believe, as I remember, that we support for T. So we are not changing this, I mean, from the other instruments. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just looking right now at the meter.
Yeah, sure.
What is the difference between the observable gauge and the regular gauge?
Okay, so in metrics in general, we have two types of instruments. One, which is, we call it observable, and this one is a kind of poll mode. I mean, like, you know, it doesn't report anything till you ask the instrument to get the values. The non-observable, or like the normal gauge here, I mean, every time the code publish any value, it will get pushed to the listener. I mean, if anybody listening, it will be pushed. So think about, like, you know, push mode and pull mode. This is the two things. In OpenTelemetry, They call it like synchronous and asynchronous, and I was trying to avoid these names just to make sure that it's not confusing with the tasks.
Oh, I see. So all the properties you listed here are basically just inherited from instrument, right? We're not actually adding them here.
Yeah, the properties. Yeah. I mean, under the comment instruments properties it's already exists in the base class. Yeah. Yeah. I'm just listing here to get like the whole view about like what gauge will contain at the end.
And so the observable gauge doesn't really have a record method. Why does this one have one? The other one does not?
No, as I mentioned, observable gauge is the one which is in poll mode. So you have to call some specific API to get the value. It doesn't automatically publish the value.
I'm sorry if I missed it while my computer was restarting. Was there an example given for where you would use gauge? Like, what's the typical example that you would use it for?
Yeah, this is, for example, I mean, like I wrote it here in the description. One of them is like, if you want to report the noise in the noise sound in the room. I mean, like you need, or the temperature, for example. I mean, it's easier. So if you want to report to publish that, like every 5 minutes you publish the temperature of the room. So this is the gauge.
Got it.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that's why I'm kind of confused. Like, I mean, even observable, like, wouldn't you have to push data in somehow?
No, I mean, it's pulled. I mean, like, so the listener can decide.
I see. So the gauge is basically querying itself rather than me pushing data in. Yeah, okay.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, okay. I see. And the only reason we haven't done it before was because we missed it, or there was no need for a push-based gauge, or?
Yeah, it was depending on the OpenTelemetry specification. I mean, like they were discussing it. I mean, is it really needed or not, or something like this? Yeah, so some people was believing like, you know, observable gauge was enough. I mean, like, you know, if anybody want to report it, so they can use the observable one. But of course, I mean, like we got the cases that there is a need for one which is not observable, like the one we're proposing here.
It seems like we now have parity, right? We have a counter, an observable counter. We have an up-down counter, we have an observable up-down counter. Right. And now we do the same thing for gauge. The only thing we don't have is the histogram. I guess that doesn't make sense as an observable. Is that kind of
yeah. So far, yeah, it doesn't make sense. Yes. But at the end, I mean, like it depends on the OpenTelemetry. I mean, like if they need to introduce any new instrument, I mean, we need to look at that and decide about it.
Makes sense. Any other questions for it or comments? Whoa, only one after the other. So then I guess simple. Hold on. Sweet. All right. And the next one, hints.
Okay, this is approved before, but we got some feedback from the community about it. If you go down to where we approved, I mean, your last comments for the approvers, just to to tell about like what we approved and what changes we are proposing to have here. Yeah, go up a little bit, up a little bit more. Yeah, here. Yeah, here is what we approved. So basically, the hint API, or we call it advice API, it was mostly, I mean, the original proposal was mostly for the histogram instrument in metrics. So basically, we were the original proposal to have like histogram advice object, which is the first class we in this proposal, and then in the histogram class itself at the end, you will have a property that it can return you this advice. So you can create the histogram with the advice, and you can retrieve the advice at any time from the histogram itself. So while creating the histogram, I mean in the meter itself, we introduce like create histogram, which can take the advice object as part of the creation. So this is the original approved proposal. So the feedback we got from the community is, so it's most likely we will have advices for other instrument, and this means that at that time, if we got like a hint or advice for other instruments like counters or other up-down counter or whatever, so this means that we are going to create a new advice class for every instrument, which is not good. The second reason is like you can have advice object that it can work with multiple instruments also. For example, about like there is some discussions right now is adding tag in the advice tags. So tags can apply to multiple instruments. So the change we are proposing here over this approved one is instead of to have like specific advice for histogram, the advice class will be more generic for the instrument itself, not for the specific instrument. So instead of having like histogram advice, we will have like instrument advice. And instead of have like in the histogram itself to have a property called advice, we will have this property on the instrument class itself.
Oh. And then there's a create method for where is that advice provided to the instrument then?
Yeah, while you're creating the instrument itself. So when you create histogram itself, so at that time we will have overload like create histogram, which can take the advice at that time.
Got it. So today we would have a create overload for histogram, and tomorrow when another instrument supports it, we would add that create overload there.
Yeah, another create, for the other instrument, yes. I'm not sure about if we go down a little bit. I'm not sure if this is the proposal or the other one down.
I think that's
yeah. So if you see here about like instead of histogram advice, we will have instrument advice, and currently you just have one property which is mostly for the histogram. In the future, we are expecting to expand this instrument advice for other scenarios for other instruments. And in the meter, we still have create histogram, which can take the advice object at that time. And at the end, the instrument class, which is the base class, it will have the advice property there.
I see. Oh. Yeah, the weird change is basically we make it just change the type name pretty much, right?
Yeah, there is, I think mostly is the type name. Also in the instrument we added like, we have to add like a protected constructor to
pass it down, yeah.
Yeah. So in this proposal you will see the comment which has new. This is what we are adding, and there is other comments which is saying already exist today.
Yeah, gotcha. So just basically we mirror the constructors that we did with the factories. can pass it down. That makes sense to me. I mean, I don't have any objection to this thing. It's just that whenever you have a type that you start sharing across a class hierarchy, what do you think you're gonna do when you realize that, oh damn, there's this one advice that only really applies to this particular instrument type? Would you then unseal instrument advice and derive from it, or how would you solve that? Or just live with the fact that, you know, you have a property owner that only applies to a particular type?
Yeah, I mean, the name of the property inside the advice class itself, it gives a hint about like which instrument is going to use this property.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So I see. So you already like basically say that some properties do apply, some might not apply, and it's just expressed as the name. I see.
That's right. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean that works. Property backs, I think that's probably okay. So last time we had quite a bit of discussion about the constructor versus in a property that is init only, and I think we ended up with having a constructor and having a regular get only property. In this proposal, it's basically back to init.
Yeah, the problem with the constructor is like we are sure that this is going to be expanded in the future with different properties for different instruments. So having a new constructor for every property we're adding, it will be too much to do. I mean, like, this is simpler. I mean,
oh yeah, apparently in the notes we decided we want to use getSet rather than constructor and property, but then in the code I left it. So I guess, yeah, that is consistent with what we said actually in the notes.
Right. The only difference is we are using init instead of set because we want to avoid people to change it after creation.
Right.
Yeah, I know Jeremy will say reflection can do it, but this is a different topic.
I was literally just thinking I'm tired of correcting people on this issue.
Remind me, you guys are net standard too, right?
Sorry, say it again. I missed it.
So all the APIs here are net standard too, or are they net?
Yeah. It's supported. In down level. Yes.
Remind me what the story is with init. What happens when you have init and you consume it from net standard 2? You have to, the compiler synthesizes the attribute, or you have to define it yourself, or how does it work?
Okay, so the consumer of the library, if they are compiling for net standard 2 of .NET framework, they will need at that time to upgrade the compiler version, which is support init, to be calling this API.
But they don't have to define any types, right? They just upgrade the lang version, and if they don't, they get a compiler error, right?
Yes, right.
Yeah.
We already introduced init in other API inside the same library already.
Yeah, I think we had this discussion, I think, a couple of weeks ago, and I'm of the opinion, like, holding the line to say, you know, we just use the default lang version for net standard 2 doesn't seem maintainable given where the language is moving.
Yes.
In some cases, we could get away with multi-targeting, but it seems really weird to say when you target net standard, you get getSet, and when you target net 9, you get init, because it's usually like, yeah, that's not necessarily what you want from a type safety standpoint. And in some cases, it just doesn't work. So I think it's okay to just at this point tell people, like, yep, you want to use this library down level, you have to manually bump the language, which many people do anyways. So probably fine. Any other objections to this? What's happening? Are we really that agreeable today, or people just not care enough? All right, so
It's a lucky day.
No comment.
I see. All right, JSON object.
Yeah, hopefully this one won't get jinxed. Okay, so I guess this is also part of the wider JSON schema initiative, and it has to do with what I've identified as an ergonomic issue with the current implementation of JSON object. So JSON object under wraps is implemented effectively as an ordered dictionary, which is, it actually preserves the order in which different properties have been added, and that is significant with respect to how they get serialized. But at the same time, there's no APIs that the users can use to influence said order, and this can create issues, especially when you're trying to modify a JSON schema. And out of human readability concerns, you might want to shift a property to the top of the document or shift it to the bottom of the object. So effectively, this is a proposal to add a few methods that facilitate this. Now, the elephant in the room would be adding an implementation for iList. That would be iList of key value pair string comma JSON node. I didn't include this in the proposal, and the reason for that is that the base JSON node object already exposes a couple of indexers, one for integers and another for strings. The indexer accepting an integer returns a JSON node. It does not return a key value pair of string comma JSON node. And as such, I don't believe it would be possible to add that as an implicit implementation. But that being said, we could add it as an explicit implementation. Any questions so far?
That indexer, is it assuming that the JSON node is functionally an array, or is it, if it's an object, is it getting the ordered properties?
So I'm not sure I understand the question. What do you mean, an array?
The JSON node integer-based indexer.
Oh yeah, it's assuming you're having an array. So if the underlying implementation is not a JSON array, you would get some sort of runtime exception.
Okay.
So does the JSON node already include information about its key? Like, sorry, sorry. For some reason, when I read insert, I just completely overlooked the key parameter. All right, moving on. Is there any benefit to having the iList implementation other than it kind of fits almost?
So I think it should fit. And, I was thinking about this when writing up the proposal, and I actually went through another proposal that we have up for review, as it happens, for a generic ordered dictionary. We have a non-generic ordered dictionary. We don't have a generic variant. And that also happened to propose an implementation of iList key value pair string comma, T key, T value in that case. So it seems to me that this is a valid design. This is also what the untyped ordered dictionary is doing as well. But because of the aforementioned reasons, it would have to be an explicit implementation, which I believe should be fine.
I would just leave it off unless there's like a concrete use case. But I don't know. Like, maybe. I guess people could be like sorting using link or something.
I think, there's a reason preventing us from putting the indexer directly in the type, but that shouldn't prevent users from upcasting to an iList and be working on that directly. I don't see a reason why we shouldn't be allowing that pattern.
Fair enough.
Now, perhaps another thing to note here is that the index of implementation is deviating from the index of you find in iList, in that it is actually returning the value of the entry. It felt to me that this would be a useful addition. So you're getting both the index and also returning the result of the lookup in case it is found.
That's because there's no indexer. Like that's why it's necessary, or no get at.
Effectively. I mean, in this case, you're not looking up by index. You're looking up by key. But
no, but like if this was index of string key and you got back an index, then if there was an indexer, you could then call the indexer with the index.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, we do have an indexer, right? It's just on JSON node, right?
Yeah, and it returns the wrong type.
I mean, that was the kind of, I just looked at the class hierarchy because I was very confused by the fact that neither JSON array nor JSON object have indexers, but they're all on JSON node. So should we then have an indexer that returns the right type and does the upcast for the user?
So are you asking if we should be shadowing?
Yeah, I mean, if you think that, I mean, I don't know exactly what you mean by the wrong type, because
so the indexer in the base returns JSON node, and that's because it is anticipating that it will be used for arrays. In this case, the indexer would need to return a key value pair.
So it's not really just an upcast. That's kind of like you have to return something very different. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it has to use new and completely change the shape of the return.
Yeah, which would be a source breaking change.
Yeah, that's also. I mean, yeah, even if it's just a polymorphic change, it's a source breaking change. Right?
If somebody has something concretely typed as JSON object and they're using the indexer, it will always fail at runtime. So while it technically is a source breaking change, it's not like their app worked.
I mean, we could do that. We need to document it though.
Yeah, I don't have strong.
In shadowing, it's always weird, right? Because it wouldn't be virtual. So if you cast it as the JSON node, the behavior changes.
I mean, I wouldn't say it's always weird. I mean, in some cases, when you have polymorphic things, a very common pattern is your idea of a node of T that derives a node type, right? And then node returns object and node of T returns T. So it's not like a pattern that, are people not familiar with, right? I think it's bad when you start shadowing after you shipped. Right? Because then it's kind of like, well, whatever your code does today may not work very well. But I think that's depending on whether you assign it to a variable or you pass it to a method directly, right? That might have weird consequences. But I mean, to me, honestly, the location here that the indexes are on the base type and then they only work on certain types, that's already kind of weird in that way. So
what's weird though, right, is if we did shadow, like you mentioned earlier, doing the key value pair would be weird. You'd probably just want to return the JSON node, but then that wouldn't match the iList of key value pair string JSON node, which I mean it has to be because it's already an I collection of key value pair of string JSON node, and you wouldn't want to create like a new collection type.
Right.
I mean, I think the shape of what's here looks reasonable. Adding iList means that we'd have to key value pair it and then decide the things on the do we use new for the index or only explicitly implement it? And I'd probably just start with having the shape here, and if people come up with a concrete reason why they wanted an iList, then add it later.
Yeah, I also think the iList one it's almost academic, right? Because nobody has an iList of key value pair today, really. Like that seems very esoteric. So you just implement the interface because the shape kind of matches, right? But
yeah, the best that I can think of is somebody mentioned like a generic sort that takes any iList of T that I guess no, because key value pair doesn't have an inherent comparator, so.
Yeah, you would. I mean, you can of course provide your own comparer, right? But like that again, like I think you are now in esoteric territory, like where, well, sure, but cares? I mean, index of taking a key and returning an int and an out is kind of odd, but to be honest, I also don't have a better idea of what to do with that. So I think it's fine.
We may mistake. Why don't we want an indexer on JSON object that returns JSON node?
We do already on the base. So if right. JSON object is a JSON node that returns a JSON node of in an indexer, and it's both. It has an int-based indexer and a key-based indexer already.
Is it virtual?
Is it? Yeah.
I'm asking. I don't
know.
No, I'm probably being dense, and it was sad, and I missed it. But so why is that insufficient?
Well, right now it only works for arrays, right? So like people might assume that like, I mean, because JSON JavaScript that you're treating it like is the string one of the object or something. Yeah, I don't know. Does that make sense? Like, if it were going to be indexed, the return value would be a key value pair of string value, and that would kind of match the I collection. But if you're indexing an object, you're thinking that you're indexing by key, right? Not by order of something that is in the object. Like,
but index of is returning you, like the whole point of this issue is you're working in terms of indexes. Like you're getting back an index, you're inserting at a particular index. Shouldn't you be able to look up at an index?
Yeah, I would agree with that. Like, I mean, given this API ship, I would be very surprised if, I mean, first of all, passing in an index will compile, right? Because the base type has an indexer by int. And are you saying that right now we explode if you do that? Because you're not a JSON array?
Yeah.
Yeah, that seems weird to me. Like, if you say a property has an index, then I better be able to index by index.
And I guess that means we need to add public new key value pair of string JSON node or whatever it would be.
Or we add a get at method that takes an index and returns a JSON node. Or try get at that takes an index and out JSON node.
And the key. The property.
No, you wouldn't need a key. Just index.
I want to know what property was there.
To out the key, you mean?
Yeah, yeah. You would.
Sure.
Getting at the index would need to produce both the property name, which is the key, and the value, which is the node.
Yeah. I mean, it wouldn't need to. Like the one up on the screen doesn't. The key that you're passing in isn't necessarily the exact same string that's in the dictionary, but.
By the way, I'm going through the ordered dictionary proposal, and I see that it doesn't actually have an indexer except the int, and I'm guessing that's because it's generic.
Right, because we didn't want the ambiguity.
Yeah. Okay.
So this is making me like the idea more of only explicitly implementing iList, and that's the entire API proposal, because then at least it puts this like indexing mode of JSON object in its own little world. Like if you have your iList of key value pair, then you have an ordered thing. Otherwise, like it's not, as far as you're concerned.
So what you're saying is instead of having any public methods, you just have all explicit implementations. You have to cast basically the entire object.
Yep. Because like, there's only probably a small fraction of code that cares about a JSON object as an ordered list of pairs. And that code can cast once at the beginning of doing its thing. And now you're in this world that's consistent and you have an indexer that makes sense with your inserts and removes that. And yeah, why not?
Well, I would question actually that this wouldn't be common because, the bread and butter of using this mutable DOM is to basically craft a response, and human readability, per the JSON spec, order of properties isn't significant, but from a human readability perspective, it actually is. And I think, especially when users are modifying these objects, they would want to interact with these sets of APIs. So I think we can keep out the indexer, but some core methods that don't involve you explicitly upcasting to iList would be useful.
Yeah, I mean, I still think that over 95% of the code dealing with JSON object is just doing it because they don't have a strong type and they don't care that much about the order. Like, I do understand wanting to make it discoverable, though, because it is a cool feature for the people who do care.
I mean, I'm still kind of weirded out by the fact that I can remove my index, but if I try to index, I just get an exception. That seems like it's one thing to say you don't have an indexer by int. It's another thing to say you have one, but it doesn't work.
Yeah.
And I mean, we can make it work in many ways. We could have an internal abstract, or yeah, I guess abstract would work because it's not inheritable, I guess. You could have some polymorphic, worker method that, the non-virtual indexer calls into to have it actually work polymorphically as well. It doesn't have to be shadowing alone.
Yeah, if we're happy with it just returning the value, not the key, then, fine. At least it removes that footgun.
Yeah.
But
watch people try to get property name 1 using that. No, I mean, that's probably not super likely in C#. Hopefully people realize we care about types.
Yeah. And so if we were to make the indexer work, then going back to Steven's earlier question, like, could we then just change index off to just only return an int and not out the property?
Yep.
Because then you could just say, like, well, if you care, then you call the indexer with the int that you just got.
Yep. Yep. And if you wanted to use an indexer that returns both, then you cast to iList.
So we will implement iList. I think that makes sense.
That means we change index off to not out the value then. And then we would implement iList of
key value pair string JSON node question mark.
iList of key value pair of string comma JSON node question mark, right?
Yep.
And we would implement that explicitly, right?
Yep.
Yep. All right.
Now, even though in JSON object, for the non-explicit int integer, we're just going to return the JSON node, right? And not the key value pair. Did we check whether or not the indexer is virtual? Like, I assume we would shadow it, right? We wouldn't change the behavior of.
It isn't. What it is doing is that it's checking at runtime what the type is. It basically does a pattern match on the hierarchy.
So basically virtual, at least for our own types. Yeah, would we change the behavior when handling it as a JSON node?
Yeah, it should do. It wouldn't be a break and change though, because currently it just throws.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's better to be consistent there for sure, and like do the same thing no matter how you're holding it, whether it's a JSON object or JSON node.
Read.
Thank you.
All right, nullability info.
Yeah, so this is again tangentially related to the JSON schema stuff. While implementing nullable reference type support for system.text.json in Preview 5, we hit an issue on the Blazor SDK, which was depending on this particular feature switch that exists in system.reflection, which effectively lets folks, applications, completely disable the nullability info context feature. Now, this has been in discussions a bit of a controversial one because it, of course, helps trim away the relevant attributes that are emitted by the compiler containing the nullability annotations. But the way that the component itself has been built is that if the feature switch has been disabled, explicitly disabled, then any API calling into nullability info context will throw a runtime exception. So this was causing problems with us. It was creating failures in Blazor. So basically, this API proposal it's not a specific proposal, it's debating a couple of approaches. One is we expose a static property that exposes the feature switch so that callers know whether the underlying component will throw an exception if they try to use it. Or alternatively, we can decide that this is not the right behavior, and we can just get it to report that everything is unannotated, as we do with anything other reflection-based that happens to be trimmed.
So why is that a problem?
Well, I mean, I don't want to get into the weeds of this, but the reeds of this, but basically, we hit this problem because it is a particularly well-known feature switch. Apparently, it isn't even documented. But at the same time, we hit a bug in Blazor. In Blazor WASM specifically, where apparently app context switches are not being surfaced at all. So there's no way currently for you to read feature switches at runtime. So you necessarily rely on substitutions performed by the linker. So most feature switches have ILink substitutions that replace particular properties that are tied to a feature switch with a constant, and that lets them kind of to be trimmed away. And the fact that the particular implementation, so Blazor currently depends on an ILink substitution having been made in a property that currently is internal. And components that call into nullability info context cannot read that property, and they cannot determine if invoking the nullability info context APIs is safe.
I see.
And this is that property, right? With the substitution, it's just currently internal, and now it's public.
Correct.
Yeah.
I mean, in general, I'm always very supportive of exposing things like is supported, the general pattern. And it's only controlled by the app context switch.
Correct.
Or the IL substitution, or linking substitution. But
Sure.
Yeah, so the one comment was that there seemed to be interest, even among people on the Blazor side, of getting rid of that. I think as it stands right now, we stopped trimming these nullability annotations in Blazor. It didn't save that much size, and it can improve the experience to have them, right, if you are doing some kinds of reflection. So if in the future, since this was undocumented to begin with, like there's no real environment where this is ever false, like is this kind of just redundant? I don't know if there are down level concerns like using system text JSON with older stuff, but I figure like the older stuff would have to be rebuilt to update their system text JSON reference, so it's probably not even a problem.
Well, I mean, I guess depends on what you want to do, right? I mean, I would agree with you that when you look at assembly, metadata in general, and you want to just produce a very small exe, it might make sense to say you trim all of those annotations away, right? But you would probably not want to do this for, ASP.NET or, you know, things where we have high level app models where, you know, reflection and serialization on the wire is a very constant source of you know, potential issues. But if you just build a small console app, like, why would you ever care about those, right? But it would still make sense to surface that we trimmed them, right?
Right. Oh, sorry.
I was just gonna say I don't think this feature switch is valid. So the rule for feature switches is that if you build them, you have to surface that you're about to break stuff in a meaningful way. This is not doing that. Like, honestly, this doesn't actually fix anything. The problem is, sorry, let me see if I can fix that.
For the people on the call, we got just joined by Darth Vader. He's trying to.
Okay, so is this better?
Yeah, that's way
So
better.
much better.
Cool.
Thank you.
Yeah. So the problem is that just to back up, the feature switch in Blazor is basically we're gonna break nullability info context, and the behavior on Json is we're gonna take advantage of nullability info context. These two things are just fundamentally incompatible. You can't build and feature switches are mostly meant to be optimizations. This is not an optimization, it breaks the code. So I think that the problem is that you can't have both. You can't both say that the fundamental design of the feature is going to be dependent on this thing working properly, and also that we're going to potentially disable it in arbitrary scenarios. And so the biggest problem I have here is that when this does happen, when like trimming is going to basically interfere with the correct operation of a feature, you're supposed to get warnings. And there are no warnings being created here. What happens is your code just silently breaks on Blazor, and there's no workaround. So I would say that the only actual option going forward is to remove this feature switch entirely from the product, because it was an invalid optimization. It saved some space in Blazor, but it turns out it did so in an unsafe manner, and we simply can't save that space safely.
And the gains, to add to that, the gains weren't as substantial as originally thought.
Right. I guess to play devil's advocate for a little bit, because I started by saying we've already backed this out in Blazor and it's not that big of a savings. And I think you guys may be right here that it's not fundamentally sound either. To Emo's point, like, you know, it will save some size. And if you use different APIs, right? Like if you use like source, like if you're using the more source generated APIs instead of reflection, right? Aren't you missing these code paths? Like you can even do JSON serialization.
Yeah, absolutely.
So like there's, whether or not it's fundamentally sound and whether or not the savings is huge, there is a savings, and it would be lost if we got rid of this. That, you know, that could work for advanced users.
If we are willing to break arbitrary pieces of code, I can make much more dramatic savings in your entire product.
Well, I mean, it seems to me like almost like a false dichotomy, though. Like you could imagine that, you know, in the JSON APIs that depend on nullability information based on configuration, because it's also an opt-in feature that we have on the JSON side. We could just check this property and throw if it's set to false, right? So you could
actually, the guidance here is that it should be at compile time. So this would all need to be revamped to be safe as part of the trimming features. And then trimming warnings would have to be enabled in Blazor, and so on and so forth. So there is a path there, but I think it is a much more complicated one.
So you're saying you don't want a runtime failure, you want a compile time failure?
We want a compile time warning, yeah.
I mean, if that's the goal, then I agree that the design as it's proposed right now wouldn't solve this, because you would have to somehow track this now.
And I should say that's the goal for everything related to trimming. Like we've always said that that is the goal for trimming. That if we are effectively going to change behavior when trimming is turned on, then the developer needs to get a warning about that, so they can, for example, go and use the source generated version, which will maintain the behavior but not have any of the problems.
Well, this is what's making me wonder if it's Blazor that's doing the unsound things, right? Because like any API that's using this is already marked trim unsafe, I think.
Yeah, that is absolutely the case. And I think that's kind of the contradiction that is causing the problems here. Like for everything else, when you have trimming enabled, you typically accept things to fail silently, either because certain important properties have been trimmed or what have you. In this case, it's kind of very loudly throwing an exception out the door. Whereas I think it would have been more consistent if it just reported everything as being unannotated. And we would have relied on the requires and reference code annotation that is present in all APIs that exercise this particular code path.
That continues, I think, a path that is not long-term sustainable. That is the path wherein your code arbitrarily behaves differently in Blazor, but you as a developer both never get any warning about it and also can't figure out how to fix it. Doesn't seem like the place that we want to be in long term. And so I would avoid adding features that just make that more difficult. And more importantly, like if we did add this, if we did say the nullability info context is like unannotated, then now you would have another difference between source generated and non-source generated, because the source generated presumably would not do that. It would do the right thing.
Yep.
I mean, so I understand the earlier statement that Andy made that we want to leverage everything at source time, right? But it seems like if there's issues where we can't track that statically, like, do we think maybe logging mode would help with that? Because we could surface the fact that, hey, you're serializing right now and nullability info context is set to false, so I might treat things differently, but then at least in the logs you see what you did, right? That would help you with
and just
those issues.
Yeah, just to be very clear about what I think Blazor is doing wrong is I think Blazor is calling like reflection-based serializer APIs, and because it's using dynamically accessed code attributes or whatever to preserve properties and stuff, it like mostly works, and there are tests and so forth, and if you do it on your own types that don't have like nesting, it's sometimes sound and sometimes not, right? Like we've seen bugs even recently where things get over trimmed. So I feel like I understand not wanting to exacerbate the issue, but I don't know if we should be designing around people who are kind of abusing the API like that, and saying that, oh yeah, no, totally, this is fine. Like Blazor already got those warnings, right, and suppressed them.
Well, the bugs are not on the user side. The bugs are in the Blazor framework itself. Is that what you're saying?
Some. And it can be in the right, exactly.
Yeah.
Like, and I think in this case, oh, sorry.
I was just going to mention that the real, like, the really shaky thing is that this entire feature is relying upon an undocumented and unsupported feature in the trimmer, namely removing attributes. Like,
yeah,
I don't think anybody asked us before doing this, but I wouldn't recommend it. And especially if it's not saving that much.
Yeah, the ask was to get, Blazor size, assembly sizes down for sure. But I think the savings was sub 2%. So personally, if we're trying to like move on this issue, like I'd be okay with saying we're deleting the feature. This would be vestigial. Let's reject it. But let's like make sure we remove the MS build property or whatever.
If we get rid of the feature switch entirely, I don't think the API surface needs to start, like, there just doesn't need to be anything here.
Yep.
So, I mean, if we're saying we don't want to trim them ever, and we consider this a bug, then I think the property can go away. I think I'm kind of on board with that as the general direction as well, given that we would expect more parts of the framework to probably use nullability info context anyway. So that is a direction that I think also sensible. But if we,
I mean, in an ideal world, everything would be sourcing that metadata via source generators. So in that case, removing attribute annotations would be a meaningful thing to do. It just so happens that Blazor WASM has certain components that depend on reflection for now.
I mean, that's true, but I mean, how is nullability info context then special to anything else in reflection, right? I mean, once you buy into the fact that you trim metadata at runtime, then reflection by definition is going to be incomplete. So would you need the property then to say like, yeah, this part is missing? Because I mean, anything can be missing at that point, right?
Yep.
So actually, the biggest problem is that from the perspective of the trimmer, attributes are always kept, right? That's why I'm saying it's an unsupported, undocumented flag. If you call get attributes on something, you don't get a warning from the linker today, while you would in other reflection scenarios. Basically, we don't have the diagnostic support that we would expect to put in for a production feature for trimming attributes.
Well, but I mean, if you remove, I mean, the trimmer can remove properties and types, right? So how is that?
It can, but if a property or type is kept, so for example, if you like either reflect on it and in an annotated way, or if you grab onto the property in a safe way, then both of those guarantee that if you call get attributes on that property, that you should get all the attributes that were there originally. This feature switch effectively breaks that guarantee without producing a warning.
I see. So you're saying there's a difference between the entire thing is missing or the entire thing is present, but it's not like present in a half state. Yeah, I buy that. I think that's another way to slice it. So then I guess the conclusion is we don't need it.
I would certainly hope for that to be the conclusion, and that we'll make up the size savings in some other way.
Yeah, and like, mind you, Blazor stopped doing it. Honestly, even if we didn't remove like the MS Code logic to trim this, like if any other app was doing this manually and they got the exception, it's kind of like on them because they were probably suppressing warnings too, like if they're not using Blazor. But yeah, I'm fine with saying don't need it, not supported feature.
Did I miss anything?
We're not adding anything, so I think you can remove the...
Yeah, we would basically say close this.
Oh, okay. I would say maybe keep the issue so that we can track work for removing the feature switch altogether.
There's no, I don't have we can reopen it afterwards if you want, but like if you want to track it as rejected, then the only way I have is closing it.
Sounds good.
But don't reopen it until I send the meeting notes. All right.
Yeah, I think we can create a different issue for removing the feature switch. That's somewhat unrelated.
Yeah, we can do that too. All right, so then this is the next one, really, yeah. So what is the state on this one? I think that's the other question that Stephen asked on email or on GitHub. Because we talked about doing that, and then I think there was some discussion on whether it should happen at all.
Yeah. Sorry. You can remove blocking from this for the moment. I withhold the right to ask again. I'll make sure we have consensus But I think we can wait.
Okay, then I guess we can skip this one. It brings us here. Who can talk about this one? Is that Jeremy? Oh, Aaron? Yeah, or Jeremy? Okay, really?
Not this Jeremy.
Oh, Jeremy K. You're muted, by the way. Yep, muted, but like, we can't hear you.
I saw your mute icon go on and off, but I see your lips moving with no sound.
Yeah, that's the same here.
I can give you the gist here. I'm assuming y'all can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Yep.
And then
Great.
there's some
Yeah, the gist here, we're just adding another scenario for read-only span marshalling.
that copies out of
Something that we kind of feel that we missed, particularly in how the allocation scenario. I believe this is for the ref
the value get up
scenario, so we can do returns. This is more or less an optimization,
within the store.
if I recall.
Yeah, the store field that's stored 100.
So the type already exists, you just change the attributes on it. That's basically it. I think so, right? You just add the oh yeah, I guess you added the nested struct.
Hold on, give me 1 second. Hold on 1 second.
Oh, we've got dead air. Emo, is the minutes summary publishing still broken?
It should not be.
There we go.
Hey.
So basically, this read-only span marshaller type, initially the marshaller was designed as it only supports very specific scenarios, and we didn't have a good way to model the managed to unmanaged out without using unsafe code, so we didn't want to. Jackson figured out a way to do it that was very clean, and we have people that want to be able to have a source-generated interop that returns a read-only span, or as an out parameter that's a read-only span, so that they can have a no-alloc version of like returning a read-only buffer from unmanaged code.
What manages the lifetime of that? Like at this point, you're clearly a span wrapping a pointer. Somebody needs to call free somewhere.
We say that it's the ownership is the person who owns the underlying buffer. This is the same model we have for the span marshaller, which supports this scenario.
Okay. So we already have it for span. We just missed read-only span.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, that makes sense to me. You're basically, yeah. What happens when you call free here? Like, what is actually being freed?
It doesn't actually do anything, but our model for the marshallers requires you to have a free method for stateful marshallers.
Gotcha.
So that we have less variations on the shape. So it's a little bit easier to understand.
Yep. And the struct is not read-only?
No, it's not, because you set there. I have some members that are set by, like, for example, the from unmanaged method sets a field for the unmanaged, and then it creates the span from that when you call the get unmanaged values source.
Well, I guess.
So actually, now that I look at this again, I remember how we did this for the span marshaller. So for the span marshaller, what we do is we do copy from the unmanaged pointer, and we make an array and return the span over that array. So this does the exact same thing. It just gives you a read-only span instead. And that way you don't have to define the method returning a span and then always wrap it in a read-only span if you always want to give back a read-only span.
Okay, so if you...
And then the frees the unmanaged memory.
So saying using library interop with an out read-only span of byte is really the same as saying out byte array. You've just chosen to take away your write access.
Yep. And that's mainly useful for when you have APIs that, like, you have an interface that has a method that returns read-only span and you want to implement it. You don't want to manually have to write the out, make another parameter name, and then .as span. It just provides a little bit of convenience when working with the various APIs because we don't have implicit conversions for out parameters.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, if you're doing it as API, you're probably not directly exposing your library import, and therefore you can change the shape in your own thing.
We've had
Sure.
a lot of people request this.
Sure,
So,
sure. It just feels like a surprise.
In the interop space, we've had like 2 or 3, which for us is a lot.
Yeah, it just feels like a surprise. And I mean, the fact that you started off with, oh yeah, clearly it is just wrapping the pointer and somebody else has to free it, and then switch to like, oh no, actually we manage it with the GC because we make a new array and copy the data into it. Means it's not an intuitive feature, but it's better
the same
than crashing.
So it's the same as how the ref scenario would work, and the same as how span works. We followed the same model for all of those. We had a different proposal when I proposed the span marshallers initially that had the just directly wrapping the pointer, but memory management was difficult, so we dropped that.
Fair enough.
So we have 45 minutes left. We are ahead. So for Thursday, I set up all the networking stuff because these are all people in Prague. So I don't want to tackle those right now because I don't think any of them are ready. Is there anything else that we should look at that is red? I think we still had some questions from Tarek on the tokenizer library design.
Yeah, I'm not sure about, like, we had some offline chat about that, but if you want, I mean, I can ask it quickly.
Yeah, I mean, at least then we can finish this. And something is still broken. I don't get events right now.
I was going to say that the list isn't refreshing, and I no longer have access to publish, so that's why I asked if it was still broken.
Oh, I think that's something else. Yeah, because I changed the code that reads the teams. Anyway, so all right. So what was your question? Is that, I think you posted at the very end, or was it in Teams?
No, it wasn't Teams, but I can spell it here. I mean, yeah, one thing is we need to agree about, like, the factory method. We said that we are going to move the factory method out of the tokenizer abstract class to its own its own class, like, TikToken.create. I mean, like something like that. And we want this create will return the specific concrete class object, right? I mean, so TikToken.create to return TikToken object. Yeah. Yeah, this is one thing that I want to confirm. The second thing is we have some overloads that it can return the text lengths. This is like, if you are providing like max token count, and we need to process the text up to this max count, at that time we return where we stopped, I mean, inside the input text. And so initially we proposed to have the abstract in the tokenizer class that to have like struct which contains the output stuff. I mean, like the normalized text and so on. But But the result, I mean, this struct result doesn't contain anything to specify this text length so we need to add this. And Jeremy also raised about like what is the correct name we should use for this. I mean, so he proposed to have a name like consumed characters, I believe, character consumed. Yes. So yeah, so my question is like, we need to add this to the result. I mean, and we need to have a good name for it. I think so far those are the only two things that I was just want to follow up with.
Can you say one of the things that has the outing the text length, or what the name of the text length is, so Emo can search for it right now, just so we can have a signature on screen?
Yeah, encode to IDs. I mean, any overload encode to IDs, which can take max count. It should be returning the text lengths.
What was it? Include?
Encode to ID.
Oh, encode.
Yeah. More. Yeah,
Yeah, the bottom one with max token count.
Right. You see it has the output text length.
You went too far to the right. It's at the right edge of the screen right now.
Right here, right?
Yes.
Right. So for an operation status function, if this was saying how much it read from text, then that would be chars consumed.
Right. And this apply if the search from the beginning or the end, right? The processing. It doesn't matter, right?
I mean, it would mean whatever you want it to mean. It's telling you how much. It's you gave me a gigabyte of data, and I read this much of it. If you can read from the right side in addition to the left, then it would still be how much data it actually consumed.
Yeah. Okay.
So for operation status, the name here would be chars consumed. Because text length, I don't know that text length means anything to me here. Chars consumed is a little weird, but once I see it, I know that it's talking about something was limited, and then it will then explain, oh, this is because of max token count. And then you're like, oh, okay. This tells me that it read, 1,411 characters before it hit the max token count. Hopefully that includes white space. Otherwise, I won't know how to count it. But it would tell me where I'd need to slice to call again if I wanted to continue where I left off. And that's, again, in operation status, that's chars, or that's bytes consumed, chars consume, or items consumed. And since this is based on chars, it'd be chars consumed.
Yeah, this makes sense to me.
Okay, so we want to then rename the outint text lengths to outint chars consumed, and then on the encode results of T, add a chars consumed property.
That's right.
Sorry, we rename outint text length to outint chars consumed. What was the other one?
We created, when we reshaped how the virtuals worked, we added a struct called encode results of T that let one virtual power all of these public overloads. So we need to add chars consumed to that.
This one here?
Yeah.
There would be a public int
Chars consume get set.
That's right.
Okay, anything else? I think there was one more question that Tarek asked over email, which was the factory methods, right? So you said for the llama tokenizer, you can either have sentence piece tokenizer dot create llama, or you could say llama tokenizer dot create, and I think we probably want the second one.
Yes, yeah, this is what we.
The only
and
thing
it will return. Yeah, the creation will return a specific concrete object, not the abstract object.
Right.
I mean, like create llama will return llama object, not sentence piece object or tokenizer object.
Yeah, that would probably make the most sense. I mean, the nice thing with that approach is also that, you know, if you ever feel the need to expose properties that are llama specific, you have a place to put them. You don't have to change the hierarchy.
Yeah, and if we have like llama.create, yeah, we need to have llama subclass tokenizer. I mean, and we will have some constructor internal or protected or just to be able to create the llama tokenizer, right?
Right.
Yeah, one more question about like in the notes here we said that consider returning frozen dictionary. Is this must or is this recommendation? I mean, like, because I don't remember the details about like if we need to return frozen dictionary.
Return frozen dictionary from what?
Yeah, in the
we have some APIs where here we go.
Yeah, which is like just the stuff that return maybe the vocabs also.
I wouldn't change those return types from my read-only dictionary to frozen dictionary.
Can you explain a bit more? Why do you think that's the wrong thing?
Because we don't actually know. Like, frozen dictionary is more expensive to create, and to my knowledge, we don't expect this to have like a whole lot of lookups being performed on it by the consumer. My knowledge of it is we're exposing it because we have the data, but it's pretty rare to actually do lots and lots and lots of lookups, walking up to the tokenizer and say, does special tokens contain X or contain Y? And frozen dictionary trades off more expensive construction for faster lookups. If we want to return frozen dictionary, we could return a frozen dictionary, but it's still typed as read-only dictionary, and we still retain the ability to change the concrete type in the future. I guess what would be the advantage of returning frozen dictionary as the concrete type here?
I remember last time when this discussed, I mean, it was saying like, because like this is read-only anyway, and we have frozen dictionary classes already supported in down level, so we can use it.
Yeah, I mean, we can use it as an implementation detail.
Yeah,
but it seems unnecessary to lock it into the public surface area.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, it was probably one of the, if that's what you're returning and it's what you're always returning, someone's going to cast it, and just be honest in your returns. But If it's not what's being returned, then don't change to it.
Tarek, am I correct that we're exposing this information, but we don't actually expect anyone to query it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, then I wouldn't spend any additional time trying to optimize to make lookups faster.
No, I mean, like it's just like people can create with this data, and we just return it to them if they need to access it again, or use it for other creation or whatever.
Yeah. So then did I capture everything?
Yeah, so the third bullet, it's not specific for LAM only because we have other tokenizers like this. We have some code like Phi2 and Phi3. So yeah, I mean, it would be good if you write it in generic way about it.
Typo there. Are we then cool with calling it done?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. We still have an hour that we could use for issues. Steven?
Half an hour.
I have a few that should be pretty quick, I think, and one that's probably longer.
Yeah.
Read-only set about 3/4 of the way. I'm now at the bottom of your screen.
On here?
Yeah. So we have read-only dictionary. That is a read-only wrapper around an iDictionary. We have read-only collection. That's a read-only wrapper around an iList. But we don't have anything that turns an iSet into a read-only one. We've had requests for it, and that's what this is. It follows the exact same pattern. It's a class that read-only set. It implements all the things, and it exposes the read-only subset wrapping an iSet that's passed in. That's basically it.
Like inner or union with, I assume, would throw and intersect with, and so all the, because you said I set and I read only set, so you're just
anything that's mutable throws not supported exception. It's the same behavior as on read-only collection and its implementation of iList, or read-only dictionary and its implementation of iDictionary. They throw not supported from the APIs that are mutable.
And then I don't see it on the interface, so there's no like union that returns a new set.
Correct. It's only it's a mutable one that mutates this.
I was going to ask what type is read-only set.union going to return, but if it doesn't, if that's not a thing, then never mind.
One question I had is, like, I mean, you presumably you went through the implementation of those. I remember vaguely when we did the mutable collections, Andrew Arnold complained and said some of these set operations that are logically read-only are implemented by setting flags on the underlying tree that they represent. And so if you have multiple concurrent readers, you might actually mess with state. Is that the case here as well, or did we solve this somehow?
That sounds like a bug in the immutable set types if that's actually the case. There's no state here. This is literally the only field in this type is the iSet, and it just delegates or throws not supported exception based on which API it's talking about.
No, I think he said this is the behavior of I forgot which one it was. Sorted set, I think, does that. And so his point was, because I said like concurrent reading is usually safe, and he said for those set types it's generally not. Meaning the existing set ones, the mutable ones we have in the framework, because they do rely on setting.
Right. My point is I'm not aware of that issue, and if such issue it exists, I think we need to fix that in the relevant. Like we should fix that in sorted set, because I don't think this changes whether people expect that you can read from a collection concurrently.
No, it would. I mean, it depends on how you expose it, right? Presumably, when you expose read-only set, you would expect that reading concurrently is safe, right? Which it wouldn't be necessarily then, right?
I mean, the statement of the platform is static things are thread safe and non-static things are not thread safe unless we say otherwise.
But like, my point, Emos, sorted set already implements read-only set. So if you expect that you can walk up to a read-only thing and read from it concurrently, we're already violating that with sorted set if it doesn't support that.
I mean, that's fair. I'm just saying, like this one, you would presumably use in more places, but yes. Yeah, I mean, the shape.
It's not changing the concurrency guarantees of the thing it's wrapping.
Right.
Yes.
I assume all of these things are just arrow set, it's same word.
Every member is either arrow set dot whatever or throw new not supported exception.
Right, but all the ones that are
all
shown
ones that
here
are,
as
all the implicitly implemented ones are delegate to the underlying set. But to your point, Emo, if that's true, if sorted set has that behavior, whatever, regardless of what we document, we should revisit that to make sure that, because people do expect that you can walk up to a collection and read from it concurrently. Whether or not we guarantee it, we should try and
I'll
make it not crash.
I mean, I'm pretty sure this was true at the time. It might still be true. And it was also one of those more esoteric ones. It was like this proper subset or overlaps or some of those set operations. It wasn't the traditional contains or anything like that. It was cool.
Does this need to implement iSet of T?
It follows the standard thing that we've done for like read-only collection implements iCollection, read-only dictionary implements iDictionary. It's just following suit.
Yeah. So the original design of collections was that read-onliness was a property, right? There's I think iCollection of T is read-only. And we added the iRead-only interfaces during Windows 8 to have targets for the corresponding interfaces on the winner T side. And so now we have both. We have the property and we have the type system representation. So we decided that we just keep it synchronous with everything.
Okay.
All right, so then what's the next one?
So then maybe 99823. Basically, for convenience more than anything else, allow you to, if you already have a span, allow you to call the file helpers, file.writeAllText, file.writeAllBytes, etc. So basically, the existing set of APIs that we have taking a byte array, instead taking a read-only span of byte, and the existing ones we have taking a string, instead taking a read-only span of char. Otherwise, the exact same APIs we currently have.
Makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah. All right.
I've shamelessly used them by just calling 2 on the span.
Yeah. All right. Maybe this one should also be quick, I think. 102980.
One here?
Yep. It's newer, but it's also one of the ones that generally our eyes glaze over, and so it goes fast. Basically, it's a couple more APIs for tensor primitives. The main ones being Hamming distance. So Hamming distance is the number of things between two sets or two lists that differ. And then making a distinction between the number of elements that differ and one where it's the number of bits that differ. So the last one is commonly used, for example, as a distance metric when comparing certain kinds of embeddings in the AI space, where you're basically saying how many bit positions do these two vectors differ from each other. So bit distance, just regular Hamming distance, and then I threw in pop count as well because we've had a couple comments about it, and Hamming bit distance is effectively pop count of the XOR of the two inputs. So it then seems strange to not have the pop count of just one input. And we already have several other overloads of pop count, just none that takes a single vector. So I added that one in sort of for completeness.
Pop count the bit set, or what is that?
How many bits are set, yeah.
Is Hamming distance kind of similar to edit distance, or no?
Yes, it is.
I think I've heard it in that context. Yeah, makes sense.
What does the Hamming distance do if spans are not of equal length, bro?
Gross.
Okay. And the same for the bit distance?
Yeah. Yeah, that's the default across all of tensor primitives is for things that take two input vectors or multiple input vectors. If they're not all of the same length, the API throws an exception.
And the read-only span of T pop count is the sum of the individual pop counts?
Yes.
Okay.
You mean like the sum of the per element pop counts? Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We support
it's not trying to like interpret one of the T's as like a bit. It's just like for each plus equal return. So
right.
And we support any T's? Oh, we already have a constraint, never mind.
Yeah, so it's a little bit of a lie for Hamming bit distance and pop count. In theory, you could have a T with so many bits that you would overflow long, but that would mean that you had more than 2 to the 60 whatever contiguous bits, because this only works with contiguous memory.
Right.
And that seems like we're protected from that for as long as .NET will exist. So
yeah.
Those all look fine to me.
Excellent. There are 2 more. We'll see how far we get. Unless someone else has one they want to do.
103.170. So these are all of our stateful hash accumulating types, and people are weird and have come up with cases that they want to build a hash up to a point, and then they want to fork it and build it in 2 separate ways. So we're adding public T clone on all of them.
I mean, that seems completely fine. Yeah.
Yeah. Don't you? It was an easy one.
So just one question. These are the only. Don't we have we don't have other hashes? These are the only ones.
So using the instance methods on, so like SHA-256 and friends as an iCrypto transform have a cumulative state, but we tell people don't use the accumulative state ones, use incremental hash instead. So this is just cementing that we think that those types, you should only call the static functions on them.
Got it. Okay.
And then the other ones are not derived from incremental hash, correct? Or are they?
So incremental hash is a sealed type, but you tell it when you build it, do you want it to be SHA-256 or HMAC SHA-256 or whatever. So it is all the hashes that aren't weird, and then the 4 Kmax are the weird ones.
That makes sense. Sweet. And back to you, Steven.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. 100369. Sitting like, why is no one doing anything? I just read a number.
Sorry, what was that? 100?
369.
36. Of course, Regex. I was waiting for Regex one.
I don't want to disappoint. So Regex has a method called split today, which basically the thing that you search for ends up being the separator. Like, you know, in string.split, you give it a separator and it gives you back the splits, the things around that. Regex has the same thing. It has regex.split. You give it, you know, if I gave it the string ABC, then it would use that as the separator and use back the other things. But just like with string.split, you end up allocating an array of the strings that go into it. But probably the 80% use case that I've seen for people using regex split is because, or even the higher, the 90% use case, you don't actually care about the match generally because the match isn't the thing that's relevant, it's the things around it. You're just enumerating the things that have been split, the results of the split. And so there's this unnecessary cost, not only of the, well, yeah, there's this unnecessary cost of the array and all the strings that make it up. So just like we added in .NET 7 enumerate match or enumerate matches, I forget what we called it. This is enumerate splits, where you can just for each over the, you know, the things. I didn't have a better word other than splits. It sounds kind of strange, but I wasn't sure what else to call it. Yeah.
What is the difference again between match and split? I mean, just to get
they're sort of so if I have A, B, C, D, E as my input, and the regex that I provide is C, then match will give me back C. Split will give me back A, B, and D, E.
Okay, got it. Yeah, I think split is okay as it matches the string APIs.
I was about to say, what did we call it for strings? Did we call it enumerate splits as well?
You haven't exposed it yet. That's the problem. That's why I didn't have any precedent.
But we have a split API itself. I mean,
we have split, but it writes the output into a span, and so we didn't come up with a new name for a thing.
Gotcha. It's the memory extensions one, right? Where we
exactly. We have the open issue for an enumerator for enumerating through a span. So the other, you know, well, yeah.
I mean, honestly, like I think you want to have split in the name somewhere because that's the thing people look for. If it would be standalone, enumerate separators wouldn't be terrible either, but I don't think anybody would look for them. Like, I think people would
Right.
start split, and then you can at least see enumerate splits being highlighted in IntelliSense as well. Seems a bit more logical. Even though it might be a weird word.
Yeah, I think anyone understands split on a string will understand this is what it does here. So split is good.
The only question I have is, like, for the overloads of read-only span of char, why do we have count and start at? I thought the idea is you slice the input yourself.
Ah, great question. So we'll start with count. So this is basically what happens when we have this on string.split today as well. Like, if you call string.split without a count, you're basically saying the count is int.max value. If you give it an explicit count, it ensures that you never return more than that number of splits. And so once you reach that limit, it puts the whole remainder into the last one.
I see. Okay.
So you can basically say, I want 2 results, a maximum of 2 results. And after you've matched one of them, give me the rest as the second, basically, regardless of what it contains. That's count. And then start at is an interesting thing because regex makes it distinguishes between beginning and start at for things like look behinds and there's also a particular kind of anchor where you can start past the beginning of the string but still have what came before it count as part of the thing to be looked at for a look behind. And so if you were to slice it off, then the look behind wouldn't match.
Right.
So this is just following the same shape that split has, which supports taking count and start at.
So count and start at also logically not related. Yeah.
Right. They are. It's unfortunate that they're both integers, but
yeah.
I originally tried to get away without having them, and then as I was doing the tests, it kept getting annoying because things kept getting interpreted as the wrong thing because I was just, search and replacing, and then the ints got interpreted as the other thing, and I'll just keep what we have.
That makes sense. Yeah, on a roll today. Stuff is happening.
So I have one more, but it might take more than 10 minutes.
Okay, let's see what it is.
24826.
I see what you're saying.
All right, before we move on to that, for the binary formatter package, nobody objected to system runtime serialization formatters.nupkg, since that's the name of the DLL.
That's fine.
If no one objects right now, that's the name it has.
We don't. That's not squatting on. Like, we don't have any other package with that name already today, right? That was just the name of the.
Correct. That was the name of the DLL. It's just always been at Box.
Yeah, I think that's fine. I think that's the right answer.
All right. Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Order dictionary from 2018. There we go.
Yeah. So this has had a huge number of requests. I think the upvotes is like 50 or 60 or something. Yeah. And it's just sort of continually been sitting there, and I saw it in enough code bases. We have an implementation of it in EF Core. We have an implementation of it in WPF. We have we just have it scattered all over the place. And so it seemed like we should just do it. We have a non-generic one. We just don't have a generic one. So this is proposing the generic one. And an order dictionary is just something that is both a list and a dictionary. So it's, you can look things up by key, but they're also in a particular order. So you can iterate through them from 0 to n, and everything is in a particular place. And when you insert, you can put them in a particular place. So it allows you to treat it as either a list or a dictionary.
So you're not going to add like immutable order dictionary or frozen order dictionary right now, right? But
I'm not proposing that. Yeah.
Yeah, but all the extension methods that we currently have that convert a dictionary would show up on this one now, right? So if you say order dictionary dot to immutable, you would basically get back a regular dictionary that is not ordered, right? So if we add them later, then that might be unfortunate because you basically get quote unquote the wrong answer, right?
Well, presumably, if we added them later, we would have a 2-ordered immutable ordered dictionary.
Oh, is that? Oh, yeah. The extension methods, I guess, have the name, right? It's not 2 immutable.
It's not 2 immutable. It's like 2 immutable array, 2 immutable set, 2 immutable dictionary.
Yeah, then that's, I guess.
But I have no. I'm a big disbeliever in immutable dictionary, so I have no plans of adding another one.
Well, I mean, the same argument would hold for frozen dictionaries, right? But like, I guess that's the same there. It's 2 frozen dictionary, right?
Yeah, frozen dictionary. We actually did have a request earlier for frozen dictionary, for an ordered frozen dictionary, but my response was, well, it's frozen. So if all you want is for it to be ordered in a particular way, like we can achieve that without adding a new class. We can just say when you construct a frozen dictionary, we can add an API where we take a comparer and we'll just make sure that we sort the things in that order before we publish the dictionary. So that shouldn't actually require a new type because it's not mutable.
Right, but you still would like APIs like, index off and stuff like that, right? But wouldn't make sense unless you're sorted.
Possibly. I mean, we could retcon it and basically just say there's an order to it, and if you give us a comparer, then we'll put it in that order, and if not, it's whatever order we chose, and we'll maintain that order. So if you ask for the 5th thing, it'll always be the 5th thing.
And so
because with a frozen dictionary, I assume that once you get it, like dot keys is stable.
Exactly, it's an immutable array.
So it has an order.
Yeah. It's just right now it's undefined what order that is, and if we selected a compare, we could then sort it before we publish it. So,
and then
but it's another API to consider.
Compare, then you would just be undefined, I guess. Yeah. Yeah. I mean.
So there are a couple trade-offs involved in order dictionary. All of the implementations that I looked at chose a particular trade-off, so I went with that as well. And that is basically to have the O1 lookup of a dictionary, but the O1 behavior of, but the ON behavior of various list operations like remove, remove basically. So in order to remove something from this, we might have to effectively shift a bunch of stuff down, which is logically order n. Similarly for insert, if we insert at 0, we have to shift a bunch of stuff up, which is order n. Now you can avoid the order n costs, but you give up on other things like an indexer, which doesn't seem like the right trade-off. So it's basically it's the algorithmic complexity of the iList or the iDictionary, depending on what the ON of the lookup for the dictionary, but the complexity of the iList for pretty much everything else.
I mean, logically speaking, an ordered dictionary you can do with just you maintain the order of the keys on your indexer, and then you use a dictionary behind it, right? I mean,
yeah, but then how do you do remove?
You find the matching position, and then also remove from the dictionary. I mean,
yes, but then you have to update every other key to have the updated position from that being shifted.
Right. So I'm saying it's everything that you're doing is the same as doing it to a list and a dictionary. So remove is you always get the worst cost of everything.
Well, remove on a dictionary that doesn't care about order is O1.
Right. So you get O1 from the dictionary times O in from the list to get O in.
Right. Sure.
You get plus instead of times. But yeah. So it's on you're now using it so it is both. So you get the worst.
Yeah.
How does this compare with keyed collection, by the way, which we already have in object model namespace?
Oh, I looked at that and I don't remember now. I don't remember what a keyed collection is.
So a keyed collection extends collection of T, so it is ordered, right? So because collection of T is basically just, kind of like a list of T with virtual methods. And then keyed collection, you additionally have the ability to, index by the key and by the key. But it is generally more heavyweight, right? The idea of the object model namespace is you derive from those types and you override the methods through validation and stuff.
Yeah, but there was also something fundamentally different, and I'm struggling to remember what it was. What was it?
It was always a weird type.
Yeah, I don't remember. It's got both a dictionary and a list, and I think it like alternates between them or something. I don't remember.
It also doesn't implement a dictionary, which is so it's yeah, I don't know. I don't like this type. Anyway, so then
we only have it's an abstract class, and we only have 3 things that derive from it: 2 internal types in system XML and 1 public type in system.speech.
Weed.
Which I think this means we decided it's not a good type.
Yeah, I mean, that seems reasonable. Presumably this type would not go OOB unless somebody is forcing our hand, right?
No, I'm proposing that. I think one of my open questions was what assembly to put it into. I think I put it in system.collections in my local branch.
I mean, I would put wherever dictionary and list lives.
Well, dictionary and list live in core lib.
Oh, and so the other ones do not?
We have a variety of them that live in system.collections. A dictionary and list might be exposed through the system collections ref assembly. I'd have to check that. But their implementation is in core lib. But things like stack of T is in system.collections.
Gotcha. Well, then, yeah. I mean, I care less about that, I guess. I mean, it's more like, I mean, they're all in box already. So in terms of oopness, that doesn't make a difference.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not proposing having this be outside. Do
we have to do anything with index and ranges?
That's a good question. I mean, blah, 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 blah. Ranges, I don't think so. We don't have like slice or anything on dictionary, so I don't have it on this. Index, in theory, we could have. So this doesn't have an indexer for the list aspect because that would be potentially ambiguous with the indexer that it does have for the key. But it has getAt and setAt methods. So in theory, we could add overloads of getAt and setAt that took system.index instead of, or in addition to int index. I didn't do that. And I don't think the compiler treats, I'm pretty sure the compiler wouldn't synthesize those for us. So we could add overloads if we wanted to.
Compiler only handles the index the in-base indexers on something that is considered a collection, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So you said you're not worried about slice because dictionary doesn't have slice, and I'm not going to argue would be like super common with ordered dictionary, but it's like different, right? Because with dictionary, I'm not sure what a slice would even mean because you don't have indexes really, right? But with this, you could take like first half of the ordered dictionary.
In theory, yeah, you could slice to a particular range of indexes and create a new ordered dictionary that was just that subset. And that's true. That's true.
And sorry, my attention was split a little differently, a little earlier. You said like I ordered dictionary is like a terrible interface or something. This is the one
keyed collection.
Keyed collection.
Yeah, we don't have I ordered interface.
So why not I ordered dictionary? I noticed you did the other non-generic interfaces.
I think mainly because we don't have anything else that would implement it.
Okay.
Can always add it later, but It's taken us how many 7 years or something to add the concrete type. So I'll see you in 7 years.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was just curious. I mean, it makes sense to me.
Otherwise, the APIs are all pretty much what you would expect. It's a straight lift. This had originally been proposed by Tyler Brinkley, and then I revised it. But I also, when I did so, I basically just took what dictionary had and sort of vetted that it was 1-for-1. Plus the few APIs we would want from that were index based from list.
Yeah, and what I missed? What's the indexer actually return? Key value pair?
Key value pair. Well, sorry, the indexer is only the dictionary indexer that returns t value, but the get@, method returns key value pair.
Okay, so we don't support numerical tracing. Oh, because if key was int, it would fail to compile.
Yeah. Or be ambiguous. Like logically ambiguous. You thought you were looking up by position and instead you were looking up by key or whatever.
Yeah.
But also you're a monster if you do that.
Yeah, I feel like I've tried it before and the compiler's like, hey bro, don't know which one you want, so we're done now. Like you can do it by wrapping it in a different... No, you can't, because if it ever collapses to int, it's like, I don't know which one you wanted me to call.
I think
you might be able to do it if you yourself are a generic method and it knows it has to call the T one.
I feel like I looked at this and there was some precedence in the compiler where it overload resolution preferred one of them, but that made it logically ambiguous.
Yeah.
I think it will prefer the non-generic. I'm pretty sure I've tested that and that's what it does. Which, I would argue is probably the right thing.
That would be terrible for this. I mean, and regardless, logically.
Right. No. So like we have a guideline. We do have a guideline that says don't put a T in a position where that T could be valid. So don't overload add of T and add of string, because it's like, great, what happens when T is string? Like you've imploded the universe.
Yeah, I've seen a few cases where we kind of done conceptually that, where the specific one is like, think like the source generator for like map get and stuff. Like we rely a lot on the generic overlay kind of stuff. But anyway, yeah. Mm-hmm. As long as it does conceptually the same thing, I think it's more fine. But especially if it does something different, it's terrible.
Yes.
And then, Steve, I actually lied earlier. We do have a system runtime serialization formatters package. It's that library from .NET Core 1. Awesome. When everything was a NuGet package. So I think we'll just stomp over the name because it's the same library.
Okay. It'll jump from version 1.0 to version 8.1 or whatever it is you selected.
Yeah.
4.3.0 to 9.
Okay. Oh, right. You said the inbox one in .NET 9 is going to be 8.1. I think that's...
correct.
Yeah.
Because it needs to be higher than 8, or the SDK tools will pick the existing library,
lower
and it
than
needs to be
okay.
lower than the one in the NuGet package. So yeah.
That was a very productive API review.
I think so, yeah. So then I see you guys on Thursday.
We'll see if APIReview.net has refreshed its catalog by then.
Yes, hopefully. I
Think
can
so.
always restart the app. See you then. Bye-bye.